So thank you all for coming, and we will get started with Susan Ellis. Kind of stand where you were. Over there on the other side. Yeah. Good afternoon. It's so nice to be here, and it's so nice to see such a big crowd. As Allie said, my name is Susan Norce, and I'm new to Forsyth County. We moved here in June, but I'm not new to state testing. I've been involved in state testing. This will be my 12th year involved in state testing. And what I do at Forsyth County is I make sure I learn the information from the state about any state testing, and I relay that information to the schools. I make sure that the schools follow all of the guidelines for state testing, and then I provide support for schools and for parents if you have any questions about testing. At the end you have a copy of the PowerPoint with all the slides, and my email and office and phone numbers there, so please feel free to call me if you have any questions. I know this is an exciting time in the state of Georgia, but it's also a nervous time because we don't know what to expect. So hopefully today I will tell you a little bit about the new assessment system and then answer any questions you have. Okay? You're going to drive for me, Allie?
Yes, I'm driving.
Should I go beep when it's time to check?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Beep, beep.
Beep. We're really going to talk about why the change, what to expect, and then how the schools have been preparing actually for a while, and some resources of what you can do to prepare your students at home as well. All right. So why the change? Why a new test? Well, about 3 years ago, the state of Georgia adopted the Common Core curriculum standards in English, language arts, and math. So really, for the past 3 years, your students have been learning the Common Core. This is the first year we're going to assess Common Core in English and language arts, and math, the way the standards are intended. We did change our questions over the last couple of years, but the changes you see in the test really mimic what students are doing in the classroom in ELA and math. In the state of Georgia, we really also needed to work on making our state tests more rigorous. The state of Georgia, for our state test scores, had some of the lowest cut scores in the nation. So we really, for example, on the CRCT, that cut score 800 was the passing, and that came out to be about, depending on the grade level, depending on the content area, about 57 to 58% passing. So we need to raise the rigor of our tests to prepare our students to be college and career ready when they graduate. And the other nice thing about Georgia Milestones is that it's the same assessment system from 3rd grade through high school. The same structure, the same format, the same timing, the same reports. So when students go from elementary to middle and middle to high, it really will be a good indicator of our students ready for the next level. We had a big gap, if you will, from the readiness indicators in middle school to the indicators in high school, especially with 8th grade. So hopefully there's some things that we'll fix in the state of Georgia, and finally measuring our standards that our students have been learning in the classroom. What's it going to look like? What are the changes? What to expect? So we'll talk about the unique features of the Georgia Milestones, and then a little bit we'll focus on some of those test parameters, especially for English, language arts, and math, where you're going to see changes. Okay? So I think the biggest change that we will see in ELA and math will be that students will have constructed response questions. What that means is, in the past, the state tests have all been multiple choice, where you have a question, you have 4 answer choices, you pick one and you bubble it in. So for ELA and math, now we will have just a few, not a lot, and we'll get into that in a minute, but we will have some questions in ELA and math where the students will write their answer, whether it's writing it in the test booklet or typing it on the computer if they're taking it online.
Yeah, so it'll be like an almost essay-style response, but the question is that is it interpretive or is it an exact response?
And that depends. And I'll get into that in a little bit when I talk a little bit more specifically about how the whole ELA test is structured. I will answer that question. Okay. The other big piece is in the past we've had the state test of 3rd grade writing. We've had a state test of 5th grade writing, a state test of 8th grade writing. and a state test of 11th grade writing. 3rd grade writing, 5th grade writing, 8th grade writing, those tests are no longer active. We still have 11th grade writing tests for one more year. But what we're doing now is embedding the writing into the Georgia Milestones end of grade test. Because if you look at the standards, the Common Core standards, it's all about students reading and responding and writing to what they've read. So the writing is going to be in response to text. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. We're going to have norm reference test items, and these are items that will be in the test questions that will let us be able to compare students in the state of Georgia to students across the nation. So it's a really good barometer for the state of Georgia to say, well, on our test our kids are doing this well, but if they were in Texas, or they were in Arizona, or they were in Pennsylvania, how well would they compare to students in those states? So that's something we haven't had in the past. And we'll get, like, when you get your students' report back, there'll be a national percentile rank. So if in ELA your student gets a 76%, that means that students taking that type of test, your student did better than 76% of the students. When you get your reports, when we eventually get our school scores and our reports, everything will be explained to you. So we'll have that does not mean meets exceeds type of score that we've had in the past, and now we'll have a national percentile rank for each content area. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about this. The test was designed for testing online. The first year of the test, each school system must have 30% of the students take the test online. In high school, we've been testing here online for the last 6 years. So in high school, we're already covered with that 30%. And we'll talk a little bit more about who else is taking the test online in a few minutes. In year 3, we have to have 80% of our students taking the test online, and the ultimate goal is in year 5, 100% of the students will be taking the test online. But I want to say that there's always going to be paper pencil, because there are always going to be students, for whatever reason, who may have some type of disability that make it difficult for them to access the test online. Okay? All right, so we already talked about, so there will be selected response, the question with the answer choices, and you bubble it in. The majority of the test still is selected response. And in ELA and math, we will have constructed response. Now, a constructed response question in ELA, we're looking for a short answer, a word or two, a phrase, depending on the grade level. So it's really a couple sentences at most when we talk. So there'll be 3 questions on the ELA test, which is just a short answer. That's the easiest way to say it. And in math, there will be 2 questions, which is a short answer. Maybe 5 blocks or whatever. But the student, the difference is instead of picking an answer, they're writing the answer. Then in ELA, we will have extended response, a little bit more involved. We'll have one extended response, and then we'll have a large extended response, which is the writing portion of the test, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So there's the constructed response, the short answer in ELA and math, like I said, 3 in ELA, 2 in math. Then that extended response, a little bit more involved, 1, and then the writing piece in ELA, and then there'll be 1 more in the math. And that math will be Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, so it'll be multiple steps. And I'm sure you've seen common assessments that have come home in Forsyth County, or you've seen some homework where the students are writing their answers instead of multiple choice, where they are having multiple step problems. So this test, like I said, is designed to the way the teachers have been teaching in the classroom for the last couple of years. Science and social studies still on multiple choice. Okay. As always, there are field test items, and those are questions on the test that don't count towards the student's score, but we may use them for questions in the future. And that's always been that way. Most criterion reference tests do have that. Okay.
This will count students are what this year.
The technology-enhanced questions. So that's like if you were taking a test on the computer, clicking, dragging, moving things, that will come into play in 16, 17. But there are going to be some field test items on the test this year that aren't going to count towards the student score. So, because you always have to kind of see, test those questions before you use them on a state test. All right, so let's talk about ELA and how that's changing. In the past, on CRCT, we had a reading test, a language arts test, a science and math, and a social studies. Well, what we're doing is we're taking that reading and language arts and writing and combining it into one test. ELA will be, this is end of grade for 3rd grade through 8th grade. Okay, I'm not going to talk about high school at all because it's elementary now. Okay. So for English language arts, it'll go over 2 days. Day 1, you'll have section 1 and 2. And on section 1 and 2, the majority of the questions are still that multiple choice. There will be a total of 3 short answer constructive response, and there will be 1 extended response question, and that'll be in day 1 and day 2. Now, going back to that field test items, your student may come home and say, Mom or Dad, I had 5 constructed response. Well, only 3 of them are going to count, the other 2 would have been field test items, okay? So basically the same, day 1 and day 2. The big difference is students are reading passages and answering questions about those passages and writing about those passages. With this extended response, the students will read a passage and then they'll be asked to write something in a narrative form. For example, changing the beginning of a story, changing the ending of a story, changing something a character does, and it'll all be tied to their standards, okay, what they were expected to do at the grade level. Now here's the big change in ELA. Section 3, which will be on day 2. So day 1, they'll take section 1 and 2. On day 2, they'll take section 3. On this day, students will read 2 passages. Those passages will be similar. The content will be similar. You may have a literary passage and an informational passage. You may have an informational passage and a poem, but there will be some connection. They'll read the 2 passages, then they'll answer a short constructive response question about that passage. Then they'll answer 3 multiple choice questions about those passages, and then they'll be given a writing prompt, and they'll be asked to write about something that they've read in those 2 passages. Okay? So this and they're not looking for a perfect published piece. This extended writing, and it could be for a 3rd grade, it could be a paragraph or 2. For 8th grade, it could be 4 or 5 paragraphs. Okay, so it's an essay appropriate to the grade level based on what they just read. Okay, comparing, contrasting, analyzing, and once again, this is something that they have been doing in the classroom for the last 3 years, and this is the way we've had our common assessments set up for the last 3 years, so it shouldn't be anything new to the students. The important thing you want to tell your child is make sure they read and then respond to those questions. Don't jump right to the writing, because all of that reading and all of those questions are designed to help them be successful on that writing test.
Will they know how many paragraphs are expected of them?
It's do they respond to the prompt?
Okay, so it doesn't really,
so
no
it's
one's
not,
going to.
you must have 5 paragraphs.
Okay.
No. It's have you answered the questions and responded to all of the questions in the prompt.
Okay.
It is to be, and it's going to be looked at like a rough draft, if you will. So spelling's really not going to affect it. They are going to look for language and grammar, which would be appropriate for their standards, for their grade level. So you would expect typos aren't going to affect the grade at all. And we piloted this type of test for the last 3 years in the state of Georgia. And students have struggled with the constructive response. That's why it's just such a small amount. Okay? So that's really the big change in ELA. Yes?
Sorry.
Go? No, please.
Do we have any idea, I mean, I understand that section 2, or section 3 is supposed to be all of the day, but do we have any idea of what period of time they're going to be allotted?
Sure, yeah. Since it is a standardized test, there are times. Day 1 and day 2, I'm sorry, I mix that up all the time. Day 1, section 1 and 2, a minimum of 60 minutes for each section. Now, if the students are actively working, this is all in the examiner's manual, but if the students are actively working at 60 minutes, the teacher can say, I'm going to give you another 10 minutes, and we'll go to 70. If it's 70 minutes, the students are still actively working, the teacher is gonna go another 10 minutes with a maximum of 80 minutes. For students who have IEPs, TPC plans, 504 plans that have extended time, that will start after the 80 minutes.
Ah,
Day 2, section 3 is minimum of 70, maximum of 90, so a little bit more time. This test should be the only test given that day. So it's not, because it has a lot of thinking involved in this. So, and this, section 1 and 2 must be given before section 3.
So are you saying it's gonna be based more off of content and how they answer the question? Excuse me, more so than punctuation, spelling, proper sentences? So they'll be graded more on content than all the fundamentals.
Yes, and that always has been with the 5th and the 8th grade writing and the 11th grade writing. Ideas has always, whatever they scored in ideas always counted twice. And so it's, yeah, it is more about have you answered the question properly, have you answered all the parts of the question, and the big piece is, can you justify your answer with evidence from the text? So explain why. If they ask you a question, explain why. And how do you know what? Because back in Article 1, I read blah, blah, blah. And in Article 2, I read, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Go ahead. I could talk all day on that. Now, math is 1 day, 2 sections, as it always has been. It will have the majority of selected response, but there'll be 2 constructed response questions. That's shorter answer, a phrase, a sentence or 2, depending on the grade level, maybe a word or 2. And then that extended response, which is multiple parts, part A, part B, part C, part D. Students can get partial credit for the extended response questions. So that is a good thing, and there are rubrics that the scorers will use. On the constructed response, there can be partial credit as well, 2 points, 1 point, or 0 points. And with the extended response, there were 4 points, so they can get 0 points, 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 4 points. That day 2, section 3, that whole thing is worth 7 points. And then there are 50 select responses. So if your child really struggled with these constructed response, they still will do very well on the test if they're successful on the multiple choice part. Okay? Yes.
So, what was the term you used for the test questions that were going to be utilized for future tests, but that you're going to...
Field test questions.
Okay, so in field test questions, which I don't know if there's going to be any in this as well, but...
In every content area, every grade.
If, say for instance, there's 5 questions and 2 of them are field test questions, and say for instance, of the 3 of those were part of the standardized test, but the other 2 were field test questions, and they failed on 2 of the standardized test questions, but they were successful on the 2 of the field test questions?
Do those count? No.
Never count. No. Field test questions. Because they haven't gone through that vetted system of, is it a good enough
So
question?
will they be able to identify which ones are the field test questions?
Students won't know. No, they won't know which ones are the teachers won't know which ones are the field test questions. The examiners know. The people who wrote the test blueprints know. But yeah, students don't know.
Can I ask a question? My question is that if this test is going 100% on computer in the next 5 years,
It's the ultimate goal.
with all the writing that they're going to have to do in the future, will there be incorporated some typing tests or anything? Because I know my child, when he types on the computer, it's clunky. You know what I'm saying? So how do y'all plan on timing this test and getting that? I mean, is there going to be instruction on that and some education on how to type it?
Well,
I will address that later on the PowerPoint. Yes, yes, that is a question that has been a major concern of all parents, and we have done some things in the county, and I'll share that with you. Okay. Okay. Oh, another big change for middle school. Middle school 6th grade students can use a basic calculator on the math test, and middle school 7th and 8th grade students can use a basic or scientific calculator on the test. If they're taking the test online, they have access to a scientific. This year only students can bring handheld devices in with them if they're taking the test online. Next year they'll have to use the calculator that's on the computer. Okay? And there's sections of the test that are calculator, non-calculator, but I figure we don't need to go into that. All right. What's our time? How are we doing on time? Okay.
Good.
Okay. All right. Science and social studies, same. The standards haven't changed in science and social studies. We're still with GPS, so they will still all be selected response. In the future, down the road in middle school, I think you might This is Susan Norce hypothesizing, but I think in the future you might see constructive response in middle school because in those middle school content areas we have Common Core literacy standards where students start to read and write based on their content. So I think you will see that in the future. Okay, so who's going to be testing online? Who's going to be taking the test online? The state has said all students who have that testing accommodation of read aloud of test questions should take the test online because there's a screen reader embedded into the program and it really puts that standardization into that voice that's administering the standardized test. Students will be able to control the volume, they'll be able to control the speed. Now, with that being said, if there are students who have that read aloud accommodation and cannot access the computer or the school at this time feels it will be very difficult, we're going to talk about those individual children and then make a decision of whether they can take paper pencil tests or not. Students who have other accommodations, there's some students who have difficulty writing and they do a lot of typing, and on their state test they would have done their writing test with a word processor. We're encouraging those students to take the test online because it'll be easier for them to manipulate a mouse or type as opposed to handwriting. Then we've said to the schools, any additional 5th grade or 8th grade students, if you have the computers in your building and you want to test more, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and try it. So we'll have different, one school maybe they have 10 students testing online. Another school may have 100 students testing online, depending on these read aloud accommodations, and that's the big key. But there is some flexibility with this year, and we're looking at things on a school and on an individual basis.
On the read aloud accommodations, will they have the ability to replay?
Yes.
Okay.
Again and again. And again, which is nice. The state, as I said earlier, for the past 3 years, the state has done pilot tests to see how well students are going to do with this new assessment, if you will. So we've been piloting this new assessment for 3 years. And we've had students across the state take the test online and take the test paper pencil. In every grade level, in every content area, students consistently performed better online than they did paper pencil. Every grade level, every content area, 3rd grade through high school. So I think that's pretty interesting. Kids are digital natives. They're just, if we handed this little one a phone or an iPad right now, she would know exactly what to do with it. Whether she hunted or pecked, or whether she knew what we learned, well, what I learned, probably even a lot of you, ASDF space JKL7, those days are gone. Kids just know that keyboard. All right, next. Okay, in your packet, there's a schedule for you. So you know when the test, when we're starting the Georgia Milestones end of grade test, what content area you're testing, what day. And there's also end of grade is 3rd grade through 8th grade. End of course is high school. So you'll see, I think end of grade is in red and end of course is in blue. So there's a schedule for you. Now, promotion, retention, grades. How's this test going to affect my students' score? Great. In the past, in CRCT, you had to pass reading in 3rd grade for promotion retention, and if you didn't pass, you had remediation. You took the test again in the summer, and then they had a place in a meeting, and then you decided. That happened in 3rd grade reading, 5th grade reading and math, and 8th grade reading and math. That rule is waived for this year. So the students will, because we're not going to get score results back until the fall of 2015. Whenever you have a new assessment, a new test, you really have to spend a lot of time. You have to gather all that test data, analyze all the test data, and then set cut scores, and it's just a lot of technical statistical work that I can't explain, but it takes a lot of time. So you're not going to see scores back in 5 days, 2 weeks like we have in the past. You will get scores back for the following year for your students. So for 3rd grade, 5th grade, and 8th grade this year, promotion and retention will be determined as it was for all of the other grades. You look at the totality of evidence. How well is the student doing in the class? How well did they do on their tests? How, emotionally and maturity-wise. So that will not affect 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade promotion and retention this year. Next year, it will be back into play. This is a 1-year only waiver.
So, just to be clear, you're saying this is a pilot program that, in effect, the result of their score has nothing to do with their retention.
This year, it's not, it's the
Only
actual
for this year,
test.
right.
It's not a pilot, it's the actual test. But this year only, they waived the state rule that said 3rd, 5th, and 8th grade had to pass to be promoted. Yes, so for this year only, it is not part of promotion retention. And each school system will make their own. Whereas ours, we're gonna do what we do in kindergarten, 1st, 4th, 6th, and 7th. You know? Okay, so and I think that's a good thing.
And now, so is there any negative repercussions to a low score? In other words, and the reason why I'm asking this is that if the results are being given so late, is there any possible time for kind of a makeup?
No, there will be no makeup this year.
Yeah.
Right, no makeup test this year. Correct. And so, you know, and I think that's a good thing. I don't need to talk high school. If you have a question about high school in this, you can see me afterwards. Okay. All right. I said that score will right fall. And when I say fall, just forget about it, and when it shows up, it shows up. Because fall could be anywhere from August, September, October, November. One thing that, you know, in the past we had it does not meet meets or exceeds. We're going to have 4 levels this year. I don't know what they're going to be called. I don't know what the test scores are, but there will be 4 levels. So. All right. How to prepare, or what have we been doing to prepare? Online testing. We're going to answer your question. You know, okay, go ahead. Any other questions about the test parameters, about the structure of the test before I get into what we've been doing in the classroom to prepare? Since we've adopted Common Core 3 years ago, is this the 4th year? This is our 4th year of Common Core. There are standards at every grade level that deal with technology. For example, kindergarten, guidance and support from adults. Explore a variety of digital tools to produce and publish writing. Okay, kindergarten. Let's look at 3rd grade. With guidance and support from adults, use technology to produce and publish writing. So at each grade level, produce and publish writing. So in the classrooms, teachers for the last 3 years have been working on students producing, writing, and being on the computer. It's learning. Students are on It's Learning, whether they're doing their homework, whether they're making up the snow days, so they're involved with a computer. Okay? But I met with the head of technology at the central office, and I said, well, what's happening in the classrooms? I'm new here, you know, I haven't gotten into all the schools yet. What's going on? And this is the list of what she told me of things that are happening out in the schools, in the classrooms. Students are reading online, students are responding online, they're using Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Wikispaces, you know, all, and more. Okay, go ahead. And I have some examples. This is an example of a 3rd grade wiki. I'm not really sure what a wiki is, but it's okay. I'm assuming it's some type of responding program online. Quite extensive that a 3rd grader would write that. Okay, go ahead. Discussion posts and It's Learning at kindergartner. I taught kindergarten for many years. I would see kindergartners type this much. They just go with it. And that was, I'm going to date myself, that was back in the 90s. Okay. Here's just in a classroom, we had one of our technology specialists was out and about in the building, and she saw this in a 1st grade classroom. Look at the length. And 1st grade, you know, they're not taking the test till 3rd grade. Go ahead. Here's another 1st grader just going to town on the computer. 2nd grade. Here's a 5th grade discussion post in It's Learning. A 7th grade Wikispaces. So students are involved with reading and writing on technology devices on a regular basis in the classroom. They're comfortable with it. They're used to it. All of the research out there, aside from our little research that we did in the state of Georgia, says students are comfortable. And they know where their keys are. And you know, they have the times for the CRCT test were minimum 45, maximum 60. So they have extended the time to allow for those constructive response questions. I want to say in November, we had we did a little presentation with Dr. Bearden's Parent Advisory Council, and of course their first concern was, oh my gosh, typing, how are they going to know how to type? So So we did some investigation, and what we did was we developed a task force, and we got teachers from all of the schools, and we got together, and we talked about what they're already doing in the classroom. We talked about what the standards said, and they actually created a document that gives guidance for each grade level, what the expectations are as far as producing published work, some resources for that to help give us a plan, if you will, to make sure, although we're doing technology and using computers all the time in the classroom, now we have a plan that will certainly address it as well. Okay, we're working on with CTAE, career technology. What's the A of the? I should have. Anyway, we're working on a middle school plan as well. So there will be a document for every teacher who will look at it and go, okay, wow, this is the expectation in kindergarten that my students need to be able to do. Here's some resources that they can use with it, and they can always go above and beyond, but there's that minimum expectation at each level that we've set in Forsyth.
When will that be available to?
The K through 5 one's done, and it's been posted.
Where would they find that?
I know it's been given to teachers. I don't know, maybe check with your school and see the instructional technology specialist at your school should have that document. Okay. Time?
Let me say, it is 12:20.
Okay, all right. So, what's the test going to cover? The state standards, as the test always does. On the DOE website, there are blueprints, which gives you a map, if you will, of what the test is going to look like. There are content links, which breaks the test up into domains, like sections of what the students are learning. For example, in math. Students learn about numbers and operations, they learn geometry, they learn algebra, measurement. So you could look at this content weights document and say 50% of the test is on numbers and operations, 20% is on measurement. And it's different for each grade level. And that's at the DOE website. And I did have a link. I don't know why it's not.
Is it the next one, maybe?
Go ahead, maybe. There, the state is creating study guides that are not ready yet. If you attended a CRCT parent meeting last year, you probably got a study guide. They're just not ready yet. So as soon as they're ready, you can go to the DOE website and they'll be there. I don't know if schools are going to post those. Maybe you can post them.
What does DOE stand for?
I'm sorry. It's the Georgia Department of Education. I apologize. And I wonder if it went something. I did have a link. I don't know what happened to it. Okay, next one. What can you do? The biggest thing you can do is ask your children why. Tell me have them explain to you and justify their answer. That's what those constructed response questions, that's what that writing part is all about. Justifying and explaining your answer. I want to wear my blue pants today. Why? I don't know. Get them to give you a reason why. How do you know why? When you're reading a story with your children, don't just ask, the who, what, where, when, why questions. Well, what do you think about this? Well, how do you know? Go back in the story and find out where. Go find it in the text and prove it to me. You read the book Cinderella. Oh, Cinderella is beautiful. Well, why do you think Cinderella is beautiful? Because she is. Well, no. Show me in the book what you read that made you think Cinderella is beautiful. So really that justification of evidence from the text. Is there another way? They do a math problem. Is there another way? You're baking a cake and you need a cup of sugar. And you get out the cup measure and then you go, wow, if I didn't have this cup measure, what else could I do? Is there another way to come up with a cup of sugar? So really getting students to not what do you know, but how do you use what you know? And that's what Common Core standards are all about. Okay. I had the hot link, and I like to say, I don't know what happened to it. But Common Core roadmaps. If you Google Common Core roadmaps, am I not seeing the link from my end, or you're just not seeing it?
It's on the handout, but it's not.
Okay, so the link to get there is on handout. All right.
Well, the link.
Could we
Oh,
possibly
it's not on.
post this PowerPoint?
One is on the Georgia Department one is on the handout, but that one's
No,
not.
I made a hot link that if we just clicked on that, it took us
The
right to it.
URL is not listed.
Because I made hot links. So
And we can't.
Well, we're gonna get you to the parent place where we can put this.
Yes.
Common Core ELA and math, and what you can do to help them be successful. And I know it's March, but you know, it's a great document to look at for next year. It also is in Spanish, so we'll get that link to you because that is a fantastic website. I gave you some handouts that were on the table and they're also stapled in the packet. There's a list of links that are Georgia Milestones resources. Maybe we could put that page somewhere where they could go to the hot link. Yeah. Just resources to help your child with Common Core. There's an article, Ed Extra and Growing Readers, and those articles talk about the depth of how our students need to read. And it's not just, you know, read and how did you like the story, it was fun, who did you like, really, they call it close reading. And really close reading, and those two articles will help you understand that a little bit more. And the Growing Readers really breaks down the different parts that we look at when we read a book. Can I borrow yours for a minute? So when students are reading, we want them to think about not only those key ideas and details, which is what we all do, but we want them, what is that structure? How is an informational book organized different than a storybook? How is a poem organized different? So that structure we want students to know about. Integration of knowledge and ideas. Did you learn anything from this book? What did you know beforehand and now you've learned more? And then we want students to be reading challenging text. Not too challenging, just right. One clue, have you ever heard the rule of 5? If a student picks up a book, and they open up a book, and if there are 5 words on that page, I mean, it's a rule of thumb, you know, but if there's 5 words on the page that the child doesn't know, that book's too hard for them to read independently. No. Because they're going to, especially for elementary, they're going to spend so much time decoding that they're going to miss the context. You certainly can read it to them. You know, students can always understand a higher level book when it's being read to them, as opposed to reading it themselves. But just some information for you. If nothing else, read with your child. The more you read, the better reader you become, and talk about what you've read. Okay? All right. There's my contact information. Like I said, please feel free. Testing season is starting up, so I'm a little busy, so it may take me a day or two to get back with you, but I certainly will be happy to help you in any way I can. I do have a strong curriculum background, so you know, questions about what, you know, strategies, things you can do at home, I can help you with. Any questions for me? I'm sorry, the date? Yeah, there's a calendar in there. There's a colored calendar in there. It should be, unless I missed it or I didn't know.
It's in there. It's colored, yeah.
There you go.
It's at the end, yeah.
And it'll say, you know, if it doesn't have a grade, that's all grades, 3 through 8. Okay. You will see 6th and 8th grade taking math one day and 7th grade taking math another day. That's the weekly share calculators. All right. Yes.
I lost my question.
I'll stay for a few minutes if it comes back to it. Yes.
So, I know you said this year they're not using this for retention promotion purposes, but next year, I'm assuming, how will that be handled by the parents, children that opt out of this fantastic?
That's a very good question. I don't have an answer for you for that one.
Well,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's something.
You get a kiss.
We are required by state law to administer the test.
but we are not required to.
We are required by state law to administer the test.
I've got her script.
My boss said, all you have to say is, we are required by state law.
Okay, I do remember my question.
Okay.
Will that study guide be available before spring break?
I would hope.
7 days before,
I check every day on the DOE website, and then we have a resource page for teachers, and I put it there right away. I will send an email to the school. As soon as they're there, I'll send an email to all the schools. So you can either check the Georgia Department of Education website or just check with your school. As soon as we get, the state's been very busy this year. Yes.
One last thing for me.
Sure.
Will there be a way for us to volunteer our child to do the test online, even if they don't have an IEP or some kind of?
You know, talk to your teacher, talk to your administrators at your school about that.
Okay.
And I mean, if and have some justification, once again, have some justification of why, and it would all depend on who they must, really have to test online, and do they have the capability.
Okay.
I have a question. I don't know if it's totally relevant to here, but is the curriculum standard that's established by the state, the county, or is it a federal standard?
Curriculum is established by the state. The state standard. Feel free to.
So when one state is maybe scored higher, the curriculum that was established by that state has a large part to play as to whether or not that score or whether the state scores higher.
The curriculum would have a part to play, and also the cut scores that they've established for their test would have a part to play as well.
Oh, so
That's where that national percentile rank, that will help us, because what we've done is we've pulled out, it's pretty involved, and I'll be happy to explain it individually. Let me just see if we have any other questions about the test. I know we're just about at time. Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure. I know I talked a lot. Hopefully I was slow enough to help you translate. And please feel free to contact me if you have any questions, all right? Thank you so much for your time today.
And I am passing out a yellow piece of paper. This is a survey. If you would just take a couple of minutes to fill this out, then that will help us grow and improve our event. So thank you very much. You'll pass one down.
See, you never touched on the typing aspect. Is there
I'm gonna
be
come
instruction
around.
time on typing?
No, not instruction on typing. Well, yeah, you're right. I talked about what we're doing. There's the company, CTB McGraw-Hill, which is the vendor that's created the platform. They have had a practice site out now since November. Schools have had that. The students they know we're going to do online should be practicing to get familiar with the platform. They're coming out with an enhanced platform once again soon. Okay, sorry, my life is very soon and it's coming. And that we want students to get on that. And then the students who are taking the test online will have an opportunity to take a practice test online, so they're familiar with the platform. They know where to click to get the reading passage. There's tabs, so they know they're familiar with that. But as far as typing, that's everything that's happening in the classroom on a regular basis. Hunt and peck is going to be fine.
Well, that was
Yeah,
actually.
kids are.
So on that standard, or if you were talking about standards that the school district is looking for, is it based on words per minute?
No. Words per minute is certainly not really appropriate at all for elementary. What they're working on is producing product. Now, as we get to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they're looking at how big that product is. So it's not about words per minute and can we type with ASDF, JPL, semicolon, and color. It's about what type of products they can produce digitally.
And what about like the standard for tabbing or line breaks or things like that?
Nothing like that is going to count in the test.
Okay.
Nothing at all. If they can read it, they're going to score it. If it's illegible, you know what I mean? So if they can read it, they're going to score it. And it's going to be, like, if you've got a 3rd grader, words, it's not going to be a lot. The higher you want the grades, the more it's going to be. But no way will the student's ability or inability to type pristinely will affect the overall score. It's what they type. What's that? It's the content.
Okay,
Even if it's misspelled, a bunch of, as long as the person can read it.
So now that that's understood, going back to my original question, which was regarding this, we're getting away from Scantron and multiple choice and doing more written answers. Is there going to be allowed, in other words, can the answer be interpretive? Or does it have to be an exact?
It would depend on the question. There may be some questions where there is one right answer. There may be some questions where there are multiple right answers, and I certainly see that coming in math. You may say there may be some type of problem, and they may have to produce the answer and say, explain how you got the answer. And you can have many different ways. You may have, one of the examples I saw, it was a middle school, but it was identify a literary device in the piece and give examples. Identify the literary device and give examples of. You may identify personification, you may identify something else. So yes, you can, depending on how question is written, you can have multiple right answers. Right, and there will be rubrics.
What are rubrics?
A scoring point for each. The correct response get 2 points. They have a rubric as well. 2, 1, 0. The student gets a 0, a 1, or a 2, and they'll have sample expectations. Then the more extensive ones will have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And they'll have guidance of how you get a 0, 1, 2, 3. The big one, the big writing piece has.
So let me reiterate so I make sure I understand.
I know. I talk education, and I think everyone knows.
No, it's okay. Right, make sure I understand.
Sure, of course.
So, say for instance, a response to an answer could be right, but it could be a varying degree of right. In which case, that greatest degree of right might be a score of 3, and the lowest degree of right might be a 1.
Exactly. Yes, that's a great way of explaining it. Yes. And it's real like hard. A little bit of it, but they don't have a little bit of it. Yeah. So partial credit definitely, which is a good thing. You know, multiple choice is right or wrong. Yeah. So once again,